Hello, everyone, and welcome to the episode 29 of the Office Hours podcast. In this episode, we had a chance to talk about interviewing and things like LeetCode and how it affects interviews, whether or not it makes sense, the whole point of studying algorithms and data structures and what effect they have on your professional life and on interviewing process. We talked a little bit about various aspects of, teaching people skills. And we had briefly touched a little bit on, cultures and their differences in cultures in terms of working at a company. Like, for instance, if you want to work overseas or if you want to work remotely or something of that nature. So if any of this is interesting to you, we hope you enjoy the rest of this episode. Thank you and, enjoy. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the episode 29 of the Office Hours podcast. We'd like to welcome back Mo, and let's chat about things and stuff. Mo, let's take it away.
Well, things and stuff we're going to chat about today. How
Yes.
you doing, Vasili?
Doing well. Lots of things, a little bit of stuff. So things are happening in the things and stuff area.
Yeah,
So good. How about you?
it's good. Yeah, like you said, things and stuff. I like the way it sounds. Things and
Things
stuff.
and stuff.
I kind of like it. It's a new one.
Yeah.
Anyway, I've been good. Work, adulting, life, everything coming in, and we're dealing with it good.
Hmm. Do you find
Yeah.
the term
So,
adulting annoying? I kind of tend to find that term a little bit annoying. I think it's like one of those Reddit constructs that, like people who use that term, they're like pretending. It almost feels like it's like if you're adult, you're not using terms like that. You just do the things. But if you're not, then you're like, ooh, look at me, I'm adulting. So
mm, I think context,
yeah.
maybe context, because there are certain things that you have to do.
Hmm.
You don't really like, it's not like you enjoy doing them, but you do them because if you don't, who will?
Yeah.
You know? Like, what else would you do? Like, there's certain things like this. There's certain responsibility. You don't know how to categorize it into like, is it productivity or not productivity? But it's
Mm.
just there.
It's just the
So
upkeep.
anyway, yeah, yeah, things like this. But yeah, all of this is going well. So we good, we good. Anyway, today there are certain things I wanted to talk to you about. Earlier in the week, someone, I think there is someone close to me who asked me about preparing for said interviews because they were just like, was just finishing like uni and like trying to get into the industry. And he mentioned how he was asking me about data structures and algorithm and why most companies try to like ask you certain questions like this and then it got me thinking like my answer was like uh it's not really about the data structure and algorithm question, really. It's about to see how you think, how you approach problems, like, and how you explain yourself through all these problems, just communication for the most part, if you're doing it live, but if you have to do it, like sometimes some people just send you the link for a lead code or whatever these things are. And but it got me thinking, right? Like I've seen a lot of companies really depend on this. Even up till now, I think Google still do this thing, like data structure. Do you think they actually measure people's and I went back to read the history, right? I think some people actually believe that it's a good way to measure intelligence, how if you think about it maybe in a way, but do you think it's a good measure of how well you will do at the job?
Um, no, not really. I mean, okay, so I guess as a disclaimer, I haven't been interviewing for a while. And even when I was
Mm.
interviewing, it was, not like I haven't done any lead code. I mean, I looked at it, but I haven't grinded lead code to pass for an interview. So I don't necessarily, I can only imagine what that experience
Must be
is
nice.
like.
Must be nice, eh?
It must be nice on one end, but on the other hand, it's kind of like a little bit anxiety inducing because like, ooh, if I need to, interview for another job and they start asking me lead code questions and I don't have any lead code answers, like I haven't done an algorithm since college, which has been like good 20 years now. It's 2024, so
Yeah.
that's been like about 20
Mhm.
years since I done any of that stuff. And in my professional career, I haven't really encountered the necessity to do algorithms from scratch, period. But, don't be like me, don't go into web dev. Web dev is extremely limiting to your career prospects. If you want to become a better software engineer, don't go into web. Do something more exciting. Learn C++, where algorithms and data structures actually might be useful, but in web, don't bother. There's other things you need to learn. So, and to me, I was thinking about it. It's like, oh man, all these stupid interview questions, like the whole manhole question, and it's just so silly. It's like, why are manholes round? It's like, well, because you read it in an interview book, and now you're asking me this question. It doesn't really mean anything, right? Or like, all of these estimate the height of the Empire State Building, or all of these questions that are like, if you know the answer to them, you know. If you don't, if you're clever, you can figure it out. But otherwise, to me, they kind of feel like these gotcha questions almost, where the person asking gets to sit there all smug, looking at you, struggling to like come up with an answer. Right. And so lead code kind of falls into the same category. It's not necessarily practical because I think in a lot of jobs, you're not going to be banging out sorting algorithms from scratch. It's just silly. Like under what circumstances would you do that? Like you're on an uninhabited island with a zlog z80 and like you have to bang out assembly instructions by smashing rocks together and you have to like come up with your own standard library with sorting functions. Like no, those are built in most of the time and they
Yeah.
usually picked for various criteria, and if you want to get fancy, pick a language that allows you to pick and choose, and you can get your bubble sort or you can get your merge sort, and all is good. Like you don't have to implement them from scratch yourself. It's just a waste of time. It's like it's good if you understand how they work. It's good if you understand like big O, little o complexity notation for memory and space and time and things like that, to be able to gauge roughly the performance of your algorithm. But yeah, I can't speak for all development, but in web specifically, you barely ever encounter these. The problems that we are solving are in a different area almost. So having lead code is not indicative at all. It is indicative of certain things. So the thing that I was getting to is like, I don't think that they're valuable for your programming ability necessarily, but they are an indicator of your ability to sit down and dedicate yourself to a task for an extended period of time, which is a signal. Like it tells something, but on its own, to me, it's and the reason that everybody's doing it is because everybody assumes that interviewers are going to be asking them these questions, and they do. And I think it comes from big organizations like FANG and things like that, because mostly those organizations are huge. They interview like thousands of people, and they have to have specific criteria for all of their different levels. And the only way to adequately measure to specific criteria is to have specific tests. Like if you ask different people different questions, you can't like put them side by side and objectively um, gauge them, right? So they have to come up with these bizarro testing strategies with these inane questions, just so that person A ticked 3 boxes out of 5 and person B ticked only 2 boxes, so person A is a clear preference, right? On that level. Whether or not you should be grinding lead code, I don't know. I think that if you're applying for companies that look for it, then yes, because, yeah, they're looking for it. You should. In terms of whether or not it's going to help your daily, probably not. I really don't think so.
Yeah, well, I also don't know for sure, but I have worked LeetCode. Like I've worked with LeetCode. I've I use it to be honest, recreationally. But the things in my own opinion, right? This is just my opinion, right? I think when you are starting out, it can help you to build that muscle memory of actually solving problems. Because at least in my own experience, bulk of what I do is solve a problem. So I just it helps. It's like going to the gym, right? Like to train on how to. I guess like there could be other problems that you could think about solving. Like you can find, and I find like it comes in handy for me in sometimes when I'm doing like back end work. So like if I'm working like something around like data stuff, so data related stuff, maybe a hash somewhere, something like this, somewhere,
Yeah. But
somewhere
but
they
but
come
but
in.
like you're not usually rolling like a B tree implementation from scratch to do
Not
that, right?
really.
Like
No,
you just use
no.
one that's available. So it's like,
Yeah, exactly.
and you mentioned the gym, and it's kind of a good analogy because there's people who train naturally, like body weight training, or they just lift some giant boulder and put it down, right? And there's people who go for some specific machine to target some specific muscle group. So lead code to me, it's like the machine targeting specific muscle group. You can get like very good definition on this tiny muscle over here, but then if I ask you to
Mhm.
go and lift that rock, you're gonna be like, I can't really I can't really do that. I can show you the
Yeah,
definition on my muscle, sure, but the rock I can't lift that. Whereas
yeah.
a person just lifting rocks all day is actually good at lifting heavy things. Even though both
Yeah,
of them
not.
technically work out and build their muscle, right? They just do it
Hmm.
in different ways. So
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, it's like you can use the machine or you can use a barbell to get more muscle groups engaged in your workout,
Mm.
or you can just do body weight exercises and engage all of them, and you're going to have different results, and all of it is considered working out. Same as, doing lead code can be considered programming, and it is training a muscle. Is it the muscle that you're going to be using in your daily programming life? That's the
You never know.
question.
You never
Yeah.
know.
You never
You
know.
never know. Yeah, you never know. Yeah. So this is what my experience with it, and I think if you're studying like new languages, like for me, I think I used to like give these suggestions, opinions. Like if you're starting out to learn a new language, the best way to really learn would be to get into solving problems.
Yeah.
And small problems like data structure and algorithm can help you to figure out like the bits and pieces of like different things. Like if you have to like Google things and like just figure it out. But it depends. Again, it depends on what you really want. Because at the end of the day, if what you want to do is to design like UI, like I don't know if you if you could find like lead codes for CSS or like lead codes for like I don't know,
You can
like I
do
don't
you
know.
can do CSS golf.
I don't know,
Yeah.
but I think there may be other things. Anyway, this was like what I was explaining, but personally, right? I think I wonder why, like before now, when this was the thing, like data structure and algorithm was the thing, it was even part of the curriculum. Like I did this in my undergrad, like to data structures and algorithm to like learn how different structures, like all these kind of things. But I'm wondering like if they were not that valuable, at least in web development, like you said, I don't know, like even well in web development, why was it then part like why is it not detached from the curriculum?
I
Like
see.
maybe we can have like um a different kind of curriculum
Yeah.
for this, like
Yeah. I think the level
for
of abstraction has shifted up. You know, it makes sense to learn these where you work much closer to the hardware. because you don't have that much. Like they did not have standard runtimes and standard libraries to that extent, right? So if you just have a C compiler, you have the header files for, your operating system bindings and your input output and things like that, and then everything else is on top, right? But now these days you have these runtimes, you have these languages that bundle most of that stuff, right? So it's less immediate where you actually need to write one from scratch. I think it's good to explain, how computers work, like how the structure and interpretation of computer programs, as the name of the book goes, the classic one. And it is, as you mentioned, like if you're learning a new language, it gives you something to build in a language to get a feel for the syntax and for the ergonomics and things like that. I think that's a very valid point. So that's probably a really good use case, is to play around in different languages, building different things. It's more of at least in my daily life, these are not the problems that I'm solving. And even when I was a junior developer, those weren't the problems that I was solving, right? And usually, like if you're a junior developer, like would you really give your junior developer a task to like build a new data structure or build like some fancy sophisticated algorithm just because they just did algorithms and data structures? Like we all know that they did the bubble sort and merge sort and maybe like, some depth first search and breadth first search, but beyond that, okay, maybe they went into like some trees or something fancy like tries, or I don't know, Bloom filters if they're very sophisticated. But they go over algorithms that's been written and polished to perfection decades ago by very, very smart and talented people. Like how many junior developers rolled out some new magical algorithm that everyone was just like, wow, holy shit, that's amazing. Again, it's not the class of problems that juniors are supposed to be solving. So in terms of showing that they understand the syntax of the language and how computer interprets it and what sort of things are happening, so they understand what is actually going on, explaining some algorithm could be a good thing, because it touches over all of these concepts like, memory, pointers, loops, recursions, all of the sort of primitives. But again, with the new languages and runtimes, they abstract so much away from you that you never actually get to poke around these guts most of the time. You just build stuff on top of it without really considering what's underneath, right? So is it a good thing or a bad thing that we're not exposed to the internals? I think we talked about it a little bit in a couple of previous episodes where, we're building on these foundations and never get to go into the basement to see what it's all made of, right? And on one hand, it's good because you don't have to spend all of this time learning all of the basics just to get really primitive stuff done. You can start building more sophisticated stuff right away. But it is bad in terms of if anything goes wrong, you have no idea how to troubleshoot it or where to begin because you're lacking all of the base knowledge. So I'm kind of a little bit conflicted. I don't think it's a good measure for hiring process, but I think it's a good knowledge to have for just to have a more holistic view of the entire thing. Like I'm not saying it's not valuable at all. I'm just saying that in the context of interviewing, it feels like very contrived.
Yeah, but in the context of interviewing, what would you rather want? What would you prefer? Like, how would you, what would you suggest to use?
That's a good question, because ultimately you want somebody that knows how to program, right? Uh, and I probably wouldn't ask people to write an algorithm from scratch as an interviewing question, but you could ask them to read an algorithm and explain what it does by looking at the code, right? Because, you know, it's important to be able to write code, but it's even more important to be able to read code in a sense, right? Because you're going to be reading way more code than you're going to be writing it. Because before you write a line of any code in any project, you have to read at least like 30% of it to sort of situate yourself and understand what's going on. So if you don't know how to read code, the fact that you can write code is irrelevant because you're not going to be doing the right thing in the right place anyway. And with that in mind, I usually, again, syntax, it's good when people know syntax because they don't have to waste time looking it up. So if a person doesn't know syntax, that's kind of not great. But again, they might have learned some language in school. Like we're doing TypeScript, but if they only did Java, you know, they can present their things in Java. That's fine because again, fundamentals, roughly speaking, are going to be same or at least very similar. Not for every language, obviously, but you know, if they know a language, they can learn another language. That's usually not a problem, unless it's something really esoteric, you know. But again, nobody teaches something really esoteric in the university anyway. So, and yeah, for me, I usually.
What is esoteric? What do you mean esoteric?
Like, what would I consider esoteric? Well, I don't know. TLA plus.
Yeah, this is big English.
Or
big English.
Big.
What is esoteric?
Okay. How do I? Now I'm gonna betray the fact that I can't explain what esoteric means. I can only use it in a sentence without actually knowing what exactly it is. But
On the spot.
Yeah, it put me on the spot. I mean, it's like something that is practical but like way more sophisticated. Like there's like some of these languages that involve proofs or they involve like whatchamacallit. Like I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily call like something like Haskell esoteric, but it's definitely more esoteric than JavaScript, right? Because you can build software in it, but you need to have a way more sophisticated mathematical background in order to like fully appreciate languages like that. And so like just because I know TypeScript doesn't mean that I can trivially learn TLA plus because it's I looked at it, it's quite complicated. Like I roughly understand what's happening there, but on a practical or APL, like APL is just insane if you look at it. You know, as you're looking at it being done, you kind of like, okay, I get it. But then 3 seconds later, it's like, what the hell's going on, right? So just because I know programming, that doesn't mean that I can easily pick up APL. So, but yeah, I don't know if they teach APL at the university. Maybe they do for something more crazy. But yeah.
It depends. I guess it depends on the university. I
Yeah.
think in my undergrad, it was mostly C++ and Java and some Visual Basic and C. Yeah, and C.
Yeah.
But in masters, it was mostly Java.
Right.
You know what? Yeah, there was more actually. There was Java, there was C, there was this common Lisp.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was actually pretty fun. I liked it.
Yeah.
You know, but
Enjoy,
like,
enjoying all the parentheses.
yeah, all those things. Like, you know, I joined the an open source project for Common Lisp. I think I still get like emails from them till now, but
Yeah.
I've not really had enough time to even look at it
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
a while. But yeah, it was quite interesting. And then you get to learn. I think I think I'm wrong. Like it depends. It depends on which uni you go. Like,
Yeah. But it's pretty standard, like Java, C, C++, maybe Python, maybe like when I started, we even had one course on Pascal, you know. So, but primarily university, they usually like stick to like things like Java. Like any university grad, you almost guaranteed that they did some Java during their day.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, I think Java seems to be one of like the. I know how you feel about Java, but to be honest, I think we can agree that it seems to be one of like the most stable programming languages. It's quite stable.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, well, when you say stable, what do you mean? Is it just that it has longevity, or what do you mean by stable?
to be honest, in all terms of it, because like even in development and in longevity for sure, You cannot take that away. Like, and also quite versatile too. Like, if you know Java, you can literally take this experience to different other programming languages.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like it's a very good
Yeah,
building block.
it is. But it also instills a lot of really bad habits, I feel. I think that
Which one?
there's a lot of very like Java-esque habits that people acquire,
Like what?
just being extremely verbose in everything they do. I think Java's kind of getting better because they're
Yeah.
like adding all of the things to the language that makes it more terse and a little bit more
Mhm.
readable. But I still come back to the website which allows you like it's called the Java Class Names Enterpriseifier, where you press a button and it like enterpriseifies your class name. So you have like some factory and then you click on it and it'd be like provider factory or like abstract bean provider factory. And the name of the class just keeps growing. But the thing is like those names look real. Those names look like they belong in some Java project.
Mhm. Okay.
Some, I don't know, abstract decorator bean class factory pattern instantiator. It's like that's a perfectly
Mhm.
valid Java project class name, and that alone already tells me everything I need to know about Java. It's just like it's gonna be intense because it's gonna be 1,500 files where 10 would have done in any other language. It'll work, but it's just not my brand.
Yeah, fair enough. For me, I think I really took in with Java. Like I got really used to it. I think up to like maybe 6 years ago or 7 years ago, I never even wanted to see JavaScript, like
Hmm.
like I was I guess it was a turnaround until like I had to work somewhere where like everything wasn't like Node.js and yeah, you have to learn JavaScript at that point. But for me, I felt like I understood there was order, like there is order, like everything there is it's it's very
I think if you
you
come
can
into
know what to expect.
JavaScript from Java, because there was this narrative for the longest time that JavaScript and Java are basically the same thing. I don't know who came up with it just because they have Java in their name, right?
Yeah,
And they're nothing alike. And
no.
JavaScript is an unholy mess. But the thing is, I came to JavaScript from PHP, and PHP
Okay.
in those days was an unholy mess in its own right. So it felt natural. It's like, oh, it's a complete shit show, just how I like it.
Yeah,
So if a
I can
person is
imagine
coming
that.
from like a very rigid sort
Yeah.
of like I think if they're coming from C, they get tripped up so much because the syntax is basically the same. Well, except for like pointers and stuff, but like the curly
Yeah.
braces, the function, like
Yeah.
all of that stuff is more or less very C-like.
Yeah.
And then they expect the strictness of C,
And
and it's
in
not at all,
JavaScript.
not at all.
No, 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 no. I
Yeah.
mean, you know what? JavaScript is it's hard to love and like hard to hate.
Oh,
So
it's easy to
you,
hate. I know plenty of people who hate it.
to be honest, if you hate it, you can actually just move on to TypeScript and you'll be happy.
But the thing
And
is, like, you can't do TypeScript unless you know how to do JavaScript properly, because underneath, if you
Mm,
if you scratch the surface,
mhm.
all the ugly parts, they're right there waiting for you. So
True,
you can't escape
true,
it.
true, but you can pretend like it's not JavaScript. I mean, I guess to some extent.
But that's just
To
a way
some
of
extent.
shooting yourself in the foot. If you pretend,
Imagine that.
if you write TypeScript and you pretend that JavaScript doesn't exist, you're doing yourself a disservice because it's still there and it's ready to pounce the minute you turn your back to it. So you got
True,
to be
true,
careful.
true. Have you had any kind of like JavaScript gotcha in any of your projects, like
Not
profes
recently.
professionally?
No, not recently. I remember that I had a couple of revelatory moments in early days of Node. That
Mhm.
was like, oh, yeah, that thing works not at all like I've expected. And
Mhm.
I mean, I'm still getting all of these stupid revelatory bullshit things that I get from Next.js just because of all the magic that they do. But that's not JavaScript's fault. That's like that type of
Mhm.
magic you can do in a lot of languages, and there's nothing you can do about it. But I remember it was not even in professional work. It was actually when I was doing TAing at a boot camp. I saw this pattern repeated a lot. I don't know where those students lifted it from. but it was like writing a promise, or not even a promise. It was like in the callback time. It's like you receive a callback and then like if error, throw error. And it looks legit from the first kind of glance. It's like if your callback returned an error, then you can just throw it, right? It's like you can under some circumstances, and it's not gonna work under different circumstances, because if that thing touched anything that is, outside of the pure computational domain and is touching network or time or whatever else, it's getting executed on a completely different thread. And if you throw from there, nothing is there to catch it. And for the longest time, those errors just disappeared. I think now Node will inform you that you have thrown something that couldn't be caught, and it will actually fail in most recent versions. But back in like Node version 10 or whatever it was, 0.10, you throw those, they disappear. You never even know that they happened.
Yeah.
And so like understanding things like that took some, stepping on a rake and getting smacked right in the face with the handle. So it was a learning experience. But I think now, not recently, no. I think linters got better, and I think TypeScript manages to steer you away from more insane parts of JavaScript, so you don't get to, trip over these things as much.
Yeah, fair enough. And these are like experiences that you don't get from LeetCode, I guess.
Yeah.
You don't learn this from it. A while ago, I think I noticed some companies, they were using like, so for example, depending on if you want, they actually give you assessment based on what you will be doing. So for example, if you're working in the back end, you can like build a sample API.
Yeah.
And then they see how, like, do you prefer this type of assessment, or you think it's too easy?
No, I mean, if you're going to be working on specific things, it's good that you know that the person can work in those specific things. It's like, it's like we're going to be hiring somebody to work on Next.js projects, so we'd rather have somebody who worked with Next.js, so at least they know some of its quirks and gotchas, and we don't have to teach them from scratch. Which, it's kind of funny, there's this very famous article called "What Color is Your Function?" which, deals with having synchronous and asynchronous functions. And like once you start doing anything async, you kind of have to go all in async. You can't go back, right? And so with Next, now you also have to be like, well, what color is your component? Because some server-side stuff can be easily dragged into the client-side stuff accidentally, and things start behaving really weird because they're trying to erase this difference between client-side and server-side. And it's kind of creating the same exact problem because, recently we've been doing some stuff on a server in server-side code that depends on node-specific modules. And then all of a sudden the build starts failing. It's like, oh, this file gets imported and this file imports that other file, and that file, because it's server-side only, also imports this node module, so that in runtime it starts blowing up. And it's like, oh, how am I supposed to keep track of that? It used to be simple, and now you're making it more complicated. So why would you do that? But,
Yeah. Fair enough. I have a question for you, yeah?
Yeah.
Just like you were mentioning how you used to work with PHP, and then I got curious, right? Like, did you work with like, just bare PHP, or you had like one of these cool frameworks?
So there was no
Symfony,
frameworks back
Laravel?
then. Back then there were no frameworks, and
You just
like the big external library that we used was Smarty, and that was for templating. Because with PHP, well, PHP kind of is its own templating language, but Smarty made it a little bit more reasonable because you can actually extract it outside of the code. But in terms of frameworks, that was like pre-MVC days. So there were nothing on that front. You would just build pages from scratch. But the magic of PHP was that it built in everything. Like it had literally functions for working with everything. Because back in those days, normally you usually interface with MySQL or you interface with GD to draw some pictures or something. And PHP just had all of those functions built in. You just have a function called MySQL Connect, and you call it and you connect to your database. Like, you don't have to install any dependencies. It's just bundled in with the language. So it was extremely easy to start building things. And on the configuration side, back then, that was, I guess, even before Nginx. So that was Apache. And Apache and Mod PHP.
Apache.
Yeah, like Apache and Mod PHP, you literally have a file with the PHP extension in a folder, and then you go to that URL and it runs. You don't have to run a server. You don't have to do anything. Basically, anytime you hit that page, it runs PHP, it executes that program, spits it out, and you're done. So in terms of having everything configured, it's like you put the PHP file in a folder, deployment done. It was really easy. And so it was really easy to get into. And PHP also had excellent documentation. They had documentation for every function.
Mm-hmm.
And on every page, they had a comment section. For every function, there was like a thread of comments that people would put with what they found and all of these different things. It was amazing. Like when I started, I learned PHP because PHP what was available. And I had a great time. I did not know what I was doing. I only partially knew what I was doing. And I was having a lot of fun doing it,
Yeah. To be fair, I would say I can see how PHP could be fun. Like it kind of gives me the way you talk about it reminds me of like the .NET environment. Like with .NET, if you work like C#, you almost like have everything within this environment, like everything, most of what you need. But it's interesting how the environment has like evolved on different sides, because I think people no longer like gravitate towards like PHP these days. Like it's not as common or it's not as popular, even though it has really like grown a lot, especially with the introduction of like the frameworks. Like I tried Laravel, I think I like it, and I also worked with Symfony for a while. It's not.
Well,
okay.
I deployed a PHP program to my server just yesterday, so it's still very much alive.
It's not bad. Yeah, it's not bad. It's just
the language itself changed. They're actually adding strict types to PHP now, and they add, like, it keeps evolving. I think they kind of keep organizing things. They go away from because it was kind of funny. They had a bunch of functions. I don't know exactly. I don't remember specifically what they were, but let's say you would have a function connect _ MySQL, and then you would have a function Postgres _ connect. So they didn't even have rhyme or reason within the function naming itself, because they just kind of kept being thrown into the pile. But that was like PHP version 3 and 4. Now I think we're at 8, and they've gone quite a long way. But I haven't done any PHP recently. Like, in fact, I haven't done it in decades, but I still have very fond memories of PHP. So I can't I can't shit on PHP. It started my development career.
You know what? People actually do shit on it.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and I get it on it sometimes because it's fun.
Yeah.
Because sometimes like you can write.
Yeah.
Like, what is all this like $sign? What is all this like, like?
It's just how you define. But okay, so here's the thing though. Like, PHP was one of the first where you could do it, which was mind blowing. Is you have a $sign variable, right? And it's just a variable, and then you can have a $sign variable where the name of the actual variable comes from the second variable. So you can do indirection through variables, and you can do a lot of really cool stuff with it. It's just like,
Why you like? Anyway,
I remember using it, and it was really nice that it was there, and you can do, you can do cool things with it.
To be honest, we still, I speak of $signs now, but we still kind of like use it in like different parts of different programming languages. I think even now, like in Angular, I think we still use it for like in observables.
Yeah, but that's just a convention. I think in PHP that was actually part of the syntax. I mean, still is.
Yeah, but you have the underscore in PHP. I think you have the it was weird. But anyway, I hope people who work in PHP are enjoying themselves and like they really like what they do. I know people who are really passionate about like the way some people will speak of JavaScript, they speak of PHP like this, and
Yeah.
I find it like, wow,
I think
like
it's
a
just
nice.
like you can open a text file and you can build a thing in minutes and just have it. You don't have to have, JavaScript used to be like that too, but now it's gotten like, oh, I need to create React app, or I need to set up Webpack. I need to do all these like there's a lot of preparatory steps that go into it, which
Mhm.
just the distance between you and what you want to build is getting further and further every year. Whereas with PHP, it's like index.php, done. We can start writing code and it'll start immediately running. You don't really, I mean, I guess if you're using kind of these frameworks and whatnot, I don't know
Yeah,
what it's like, but the fact that I can just create a file and immediately run it, that's very satisfying. And that removes a lot of the friction and a lot of because if it takes me 15 minutes to start, just before I even start writing code, halfway through I'd be like, oh, I don't really want to do that. And I might not even go for that idea that I had. But with PHP, I can just open a file and write code and run it and see if it works. And if it doesn't, fine. If it does, cool. So it's just
yeah.
gets you
I
to the
guess
results quicker.
that's why it made it very susceptible. Oh, susceptible. Oh, how do you say that word? It's
Successful?
success, success. Oh, you make it like very easy to target. How do
Yeah.
you say that word? Just pronounce
Accessible?
that word. Success.
Accessible?
You know what? We'll
No?
try
Okay,
next time.
never mind.
It's
Yeah.
okay. It's okay. But it makes it easy to actually target like security work. It's like it's easy to just like get a file in the
Mm.
in the
Yeah,
how do you say that thing? You can
that's,
just like it makes
yeah.
it very easy, you know?
I
But
yeah, I think the security landscape was also very, very different back then. I think the
yeah,
amount of deliberate attacks was way smaller than so like it wasn't such a big consideration. But we live in a different time, so we have to adapt to the
yeah,
new realities.
yeah. In our conversation just now, you mentioned Apache,
Yeah,
and I remember like this was like pretty common. Like, but what happened to these people? Like
it's
Apache
still
and
around,
other so
still
really?
exists. Yeah, yeah. I mean, why not? Like,
Like,
why
but
why wouldn't
where are
it?
they?
Huh?
No, I don't know because nobody talks about them anymore. Apache was a big deal. Like
Apache
it
still is a
was.
big deal. I mean, Apache, okay, so when I'm talking Apache, I'm talking specifically Apache HTTPD. But Apache as a foundation, like half of Java stuff that people use comes from Apache Foundation. So they're like very
So
well
they're still
alive and
there.
kicking. Yeah, of course.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I've not really heard about them anymore. I guess I've not been in their environment.
It's just that they're
I've not
so
been in several.
stable and drama free that literally everything that needs to be said was already said about it, and people just use it without having to go into the details. It's just
I
there,
imagine so. Yeah, because I've not really heard anything about them in a long time. Anyway,
Yeah, yeah.
as there's no news is good news. As long
Yeah,
as there's
exactly, exactly.
no news is good. Anyway, so I also wanted to bring up like there's this set of guys. I don't know if you ever met them. The CS50 guys. You seen them?
CS50.
Oh, really?
No.
You know what? I'll put you on Vasili. So, I mean, you don't need this. Maybe you do. But yeah, they really like they teach like computer science, but as a as a curriculum, not just like teach you programming, like they teach. So when I was talking earlier about like lead code and like preparing for interviews, I find these people, these resources, like I find them to do a lot of good work. Like like the things that you will be learning in a classroom, like in a uni, I think, yeah, things that they actually break down into like modules and like all this kind of stuff. Then like I got thinking, right? Who are these people and like but and why would they even be doing something like this and what do they seem to gain from it? Because at first they were like partnering with like Harvard. So if you have a CS50 certificate, you can like I think there's somewhere on there like I think EDX or something like Harvard or something like this. Anyway, I was just curious, like, why, why, and how do these people actually benefit from what they do really? Because it's not just like content, it's actually really serious stuff. And why are they not being held by schools? Because the things that people actually pay a lot of money for are the things they are teaching on YouTube. you know,
I
you
was
know?
I was watching a conversation. Do you know Mike Rowe from Dirty Jobs?
No,
There was like a show,
no.
there was a show I think on Discovery called Dirty Jobs where he was basically going for all of these kind of blue collar jobs, like welding and auto mechanic and farming and ranching and like all of the things that most people kind of don't want to do. And he would just make episodes about people doing those jobs. And anyway, it was a very popular show. And he did an interview recently and that I watched, and he was just saying that he has a foundation of his own that actually encourages people to go into trades. They have like scholarships for people who want to go into trades. And he was just saying like that he was just watching some lecture from Harvard online for free. And it's like there's so much information that you can just watch online for free. And why people aren't doing it, I don't know. I think some people do. And for some people, they still think that having the piece of paper from a university is worth more than, the knowledge that you allegedly supposed to obtain there. And you're right. There's a ton of information out there that you can just have for free. I think it's hard to do on your own. It's not impossible, but it's difficult because you can watch the lecture and you can read the textbook, but if you get stuck, it's really hard to get yourself unstuck by your own. It works much easier if you have somebody there that can show you where your gap in understanding is so you can fix it quicker. I mean, ultimately, I think if you spend enough time, you can probably figure it out on your own. It's a much more pleasant experience if you have a teacher of some sort. So
Hmm.
yeah.
But for you, like, would you would you want to check out stuff like this, like for yourself? Because you know
Potentially.
why?
Yeah.
You know why?
Mm.
I think we talked a little bit about this last time, and I noticed that mm, sometimes, like when you get to a certain level, like some of this information or like some of this like learning, they seem maybe too trivial, and you probably don't want to put effort into it to like to learn it, or like not really learn, but to like study it in a way. But because it feels trivial, it feels like, well, I want to learn it. But the thing is, like, I noticed that, like, right now, I'm doing some sort of mentorship in a way for some in my team.
Mm.
And
Very good.
sometimes, like, oh, thank you. So sometimes, like, they ask me, like, questions, and someone asks me question about certain things. And then I think about it, like, um, I would know this answer. Like, I wouldn't expect someone to ask me this thing, but also like if they're trivial, like I wouldn't expect someone in this level to ask me this thing, but because like you're just starting and you ask me this question, I feel like I need to know it. But then again, it puts me in a position where I feel like I need to go learn those basic things that
Yeah.
I felt they were trivial. So,
Yeah.
and the reason why I was asking you, like,
Yeah,
would you
actually,
put
uh,
yourself through this to
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
learn
yeah.
basic things even now?
I was gonna say that a lot of the really good questions that I was asked during my TAing days were the ones where I didn't necessarily have the answer. But the beauty of it was that we usually just sat down on a spot and tried to like dig it out. And then in the process of finding out and explaining it, you gain much better understanding of it yourself. And so I think that's worthwhile because I did get deeper understand like in the beginning of the curriculum where everything was mostly in Ruby. I did not do Ruby. I touched it briefly, but it wasn't my primary language. and it has a lot of wonderful things about it that I did not know. And so some of the questions were like, why is this happening? And I was like, oh, I don't know. That's interesting. Let's find out. And then you start digging, and once you discover it, it's like, well, now I know. Now I don't have to spend half an hour to learn how to give the answer. I can just give the answer. But that exercise was also very, very illuminating. And so, and the thing is, the gaps that people might have in their understanding are vast and random. You would expect people knowing certain things, and they don't. And so you get to learn as well, which again solidifies your own understanding. It makes it more holistic. So I think it's a
Yeah,
good thing. Like I
yeah,
don't think that there's a reason to be frustrated at people asking questions like that. I mean,
uh-huh.
I think I mentioned it before. Like if a person asks that question 3 times in a row, I'd get frustrated. But the first time, hey, you don't know, you don't know. Let's find out.
Honestly, to be honest, like I enjoy teaching, but I enjoy teaching a lot. But the part that it's not frustrating, it's just like it just challenges me,
Yeah.
in a way that I feel like, oh, this thing I know this, but to explain it to you, it's like it's a while ago. Like
Well,
I'm not.
knowing that's the difference, right? Knowing and being able to explain it is like, I think that's where the teacher is made, is in the ability to
Mm,
explain it and be understood. Because
yeah,
plenty of very talented people, if you ask them to explain how they do it or why they do it or what they do, they will have a really hard time, even though they can be very professional in their domain. I think we talked about, it's like if you ask a virtuoso pianist or violinist to teach somebody how to play, just because they're a genius themselves in terms of their playing ability doesn't mean that they're as equally good in the teaching of it, right? So it's a
yeah,
different skill set. And I think that once you start going into it and uncover
mm,
that side, it again gives like a more holistic picture overall in other aspects of the job itself. So I think it's a worthwhile pursuit, and more people should try it.
more people should try
Teaching.
learning the teaching.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
I think
Yeah.
you can understand things better through teaching them to other people. And it was kind of funny. I was watching this other interview recently, and it's much easier. How was it phrased? I remember like echoing the sentiment, because it was said that I said myself in not so in different words, but it's like, if you're not a professional in some area, it's nice to teach it, because you get to learn and solidify the knowledge, because you're closer to their level as you are to like very, very high level. But if you're at a very, very high level, the gap between understanding is so vast that you find the questions trivial, and you would have a hard time explaining things, because you're operating like at this level,
Mm,
and they
mm,
need explanations just from a level slightly above theirs, and it's hard to bridge it back. I remember, I think we talked about this. I would say like you like regress in your understanding just slightly above their level and explain it from there and kind of build it up, right?
yeah. Yeah, I'm learning a lot about this. I told you, like I think in the beginning of the year, I mentioned to you like this is something that I actually want to do this year. So it's going well. We'll see how it
Yeah,
goes. And
nice.
yeah, I guess finally, I also wanted to ask you about I guess many people talk to me about like not many people. I say that like I'm an influencer. Not many people. Not many people. No, just a few close people who we relate together. Like they mentioned, we're having the conversation about working overseas. And one of the things that came up in our conversation was about, do people have different cultures? Like I think
Yeah,
we talked about this before one time,
yeah,
and
yeah,
like and then I felt like it depends. I think if you get a job in Denmark, for example, and you work as a software developer, Java is still Java in Denmark. And maybe if you work remotely, you don't have to be in the office. Um, I don't know how much difference that would be. But I don't know. Again, so
Uh, yeah. Well, I mean, it, Java is Java, but
people are not
Danish
people.
and Canadian are quite different, I think.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think you have to be prepared for cultural differences for sure, just in a matter of communication. And I guess if you're working remote and you're in a different time zone and you never attend any meetings, I would find it difficult for that type of mode of work where you don't really interact. If you don't interact with anybody, then of course it doesn't make a difference. I mean, you still probably send emails and whatnot. And so, yeah, the norms are going to be different. And I just think that you have to be open to the fact that miscommunication will happen and you will misinterpret things and they will misinterpret things equally. So I never really been in a situation like this, but I definitely like in terms of like the attitude of like Russian people when they work versus attitude of Canadian people is quite different. And usually like we have to adapt to the Canadian sensibilities because otherwise it would be completely different. Like way more direct, way less sugarcoaty, more direct, I think, and more to the point. And I don't think that people would care about your feelings as much. They'd be way more blunt. And I think a lot of people find it these days they can't really they don't deal with it too well because they feel it as if they're being personally attacked. And it's just like, no, that's just a person telling them an honest opinion of something does not necessarily constitute an attack per se. It's just, you have to be extra cautious around too many things, in here. So I don't know what the norms are in Denmark, but I'm pretty sure they're different enough that there's going to be something.
I wonder what it would be. Cause now that you can actually like work across the globe, I
Yeah.
just I get curious, like what would it be like, if you just like find
Yeah,
opportunities
I have
everywhere.
I have no idea. But
But
yeah.
but what are like some really obvious things? Like let's say you work in Russia. If I go to work in Russia, for example, what are some pretty obvious things like you will not miss it? What are some cultural things that I would notice immediately as I start on my first day?
You know what? It's a really good question because I haven't really worked there. I haven't lived there in 20 years. And in terms of
Uh,
that's happening right now, I only have like anecdotal um notions from probably biased set of sources. So I can't really tell you,
hmm.
but yeah, it's yeah, I don't know. I don't know. That's a really good question, but unfortunately I don't really
Yeah,
have an answer
yeah.
for it. It's I
Next
guess
time
I
then.
guess if I say something like if I were to work like in Africa, like what's the big thing, right? Because at least you had more recent
Mm,
experiences there, I
I
would
could tell
imagine.
you. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Like for example, compared to Canada, no, Africa. I'm from Nigeria,
Nigeria. Well, Africa
Yeah.
more broadly, right? I mean, obviously it's
Yeah.
very, very different within it.
Yeah. So like in Nigeria, um, you know how like here, like the CEOs, like the heads of the companies, they try to be your friend, like they try to be close to you. We don't really have this culture in Nigeria. Like the boss is the boss, and it's a privilege for you to behold the boss.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is one, and also like I think in IT, I would say like there are some ways like how do you say that? Like I'm trying my best right now to explain a lot. Even me, and now I realize like it's been a while. It's been a few years now, but I know for sure. Like one of the first things you will know is like the respecting. Everybody really wants respect, and here nobody minds like the other day, like you can say whatever you want, like you have like more freedom of
Yeah.
speech
So it's like
here,
it's
but
more stratified. Like
hierarchical.
yeah,
Yeah,
hierarchical. Yeah.
yeah. The hierarchy is very um it's very you can see it easily. Like it's quite significant. Like
Right.
if
Yeah.
if someone is your boss, they let you know they are your boss like straight away. Like
Right. I think in Russia that would be
yeah,
valid too. I think the other thing that I
yeah.
just remembered is that in Russia, people get promoted to higher positions younger. Like it's fairly
Mm,
normal to have like a 30-year-old division VP or something like that in a company.
mm.
Whereas
In
here,
Russia.
yeah. In here, it's like you have to be like in your 50s to be anywhere near the C-suite, right? So
Yeah,
it takes
yeah,
much longer to get promoted, but over there, if you know what you're doing, getting up the hierarchy happens much quicker. And so I remember talking to people, and you know, some of them are like moving out of Russia because of recent events, and they say, "Oh, you know, I used to be I don't know, like VP of logistics for this transport company," and
mm,
the person is like 34 or something like that. And here I only get basic jobs, like no one will ever, like I can never find the same equivalent in level because
yeah,
they see that I'm 30 and they're like, don't even bother, you know? So
yeah,
there's definitely
yeah.
differences of
There's
that
that too.
nature too. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I think it's true. Like even in Nigeria too. Like I think we have stuff like this. Like it depends on the industry though. But if you work in like in tech, it's pretty. You move up pretty quickly, like regardless of your age. But the thing is, in the tech industry in Nigeria, it's mostly young people anyway.
yeah.
So like it's not common to find someone in their honestly, I don't know if it's possible. I don't know. It's possible, right? Of course, some people must have been doing it for a long time, but from my point of view right now, I think it's mostly dominated by like young people anyway. So it is what it is.
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see where how it goes like in the coming years. So that's about it for today. Thank you. Thank you very much for your time, Vasili. It's really
Thank
nice
you.
chatting with you.
Thank you, Mo. Great conversation. I hope everyone
Yeah.
enjoyed it. You know, comment what you think about the cultural differences in various places. I mean,
Yeah.
Canada is quite a melting pot. We have people from everywhere, so I guess it'll be interesting to see what
Hmm.
kind of experiences people had that are that they did not fully kind of appreciate in the very beginning. So let us know how it goes, and I hope that you'll join us for the next one. Thank you, and have a great night. Bye.
Bye.